Hello, April. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. We've known each other for quite a while now, and I came to know you through some mutual friends in the market research industry. And we very quickly connected, and you have been really generous with baaldan and also, in talking with me about many, many different ideas and things that inspire us. So it's my pleasure to have you here today to talk to you more about you. So welcome.
Thank you. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. So April, I would like to start with something that I know about you, and you're often referred to as sort of the queen of qualitative research. You're a highly, highly empathetic person. You wrote an amazing book, The Firestarter, and something that I think you do really well is channel your empathy to draw out insights. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about, how you got into that, what drew you to that, what, sort of how you're on this path today in terms of research and your career.
So, yeah, I appreciate the question. It makes me think about even going way back to childhood. I grew up on a farm. And so we were constantly creating, right? Like every year you have to create a crop or you don't survive. And, there was kind of something programmed inside of me to what you create actually makes an impact on others. And when we were as a family, trying to make our lives work, plus run a business, everyone had to come together in order to make a crop happen. And so I think I just learned a lot that was just programmed early, that what we create is done so more holistically, more sustainably if we do it together, because not one person could create. And so I found myself in a field where I was constantly helping other creators create things together. And that it gives me joy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I've definitely seen you light up in those instances for sure. The other thing that I think is really interesting about you is that you have a very warm, generous heart. I mean, I've seen you in action. I have seen the impact you've made with baaldan. You made a very generous grant to help, children, impoverished children in rural Nepal with education. And I'd like to ask you, about what drew you to supporting baaldan, what draws you to giving in general, and how do you approach the causes you choose?
I mean, just a fantastic question. And I get really emotional, thinking about my journey to giving. So I get emotional because I also grew up believing very holistically that you give a tithe, like a 10% of whatever. And that grew from the church that I grew up in. And so the programming was that you're always giving 10%, and that's just part of what you do. And I get emotional because when I went through a divorce in 2019, I actually had almost like a little bit of an awakening, if you will, spiritually, where I started seeing that I can give outside of the church. Those two don't have to be linked completely. And so with that kind of new awareness, I started seeking causes that I was passionate about. And then, of course, the thing that I was passionate about were those who were marginalized. And, okay, who that is marginalized do I care about? Oh, I care about educating children. I care about projects and passions that are around giving people a better life that otherwise would not be able to even to have that. And so why? I think it's because some days you wake up and you just realize how blessed you are. There's just so many blessings in my life that for whatever karmic reasons happened in this time and space for me. And so why not share, in a way that is helpful to others who do not have the same capabilities, education, connections that I do. So it made me very passionate about wanting to give back in the same way that I've been given to, by luck or coincidence or whatever.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing that. And, I know how big of a heart you have. I know how genuinely you feel when you give. And, for a lot of people, giving can also be a pressured thing. It can be a confusing thing. There are hundreds of different causes and charities out there. And like you said, we exist in quite a lot of abundance, right? We all have many, many blessings sitting where we sit in the professional spheres that we sit, even living in a country as blessed as we are. And so what advice would you have for somebody maybe who's had the same journey as you? Maybe they were just, used to giving in a certain way through church or just one particular cause. And how would you suggest somebody who might be struggling with the confusion of how to make an impact or how to make a difference? Where would you tell them to go?
What a great question, because ironically, one of my chapters in my book is around the subject of confusion. And so I study confusion and why it exists within us and what it means, et cetera. And, I'm a big believer that confusion is a overlay of fear, and confusion almost masks fear so that we don't have to kind of deal with what we're scared of. Mm-hmm. So if I just apply that in my own life, I can tell you that for me, confusion for giving often occurred in my journey of where to give because of too much input and not enough heart-inspired resonance. And when I believe that if we look at what we care about, what we enjoy, what burns us up inside, what we hate to see in the world, those are the stepping stones to move us from confusion, maybe fear, to actually doing small things. So for example, when I started giving to you, what occurred for me about 3 months before that, I don't even know if you know, is, after my divorce, when I felt like on the other side of it, how blessed I was, that I still was standing, I could still operate, survive, financially create for my child. I recognized how what a small percentage of women get to do that. There are a lot of people on the other side of divorce who cannot make ends meet. And there's a fear around that. So I started getting really excited about helping marginalized, women and children. And so you came along and honestly, you inspired me. It inspires me to see people creating things that didn't exist before because of their inspiration. And so it moves me from where do I give to I'm going to just give to her because she's doing incredible things and I want to help her.
Wow. Thank you so much. And
you're welcome.
Thank you. I think, one of the things that is also interesting is when I created Baaldan, I had no idea what I was doing. And it has been a journey. It has evolved over 17 years. So I started with one kid and then there was, there's this school that needs to be built. Maybe I can raise the money for that. And, even most recently in December, it was there's a famine in East Africa. Maybe I can raise money to help those little ones who are dying of malnutrition. And so even for me, the framework that you just stated about, what moves you, what inspires you, where do you want to see injustice maybe, being addressed is actually what I'm still doing within the structure of Baaldan, but it's the same process that even I go through because, when you run a charity, you have to still make those decisions of where you invest. So the money can have impact, but it's very much a heart-centered decision. I wouldn't say that it's separate from that either. So I really, I think it's the same, actually, no matter what side you sit on, whether you're the side of the nonprofit or the donor.
Yeah, I mean, what you just brought up for me is, honestly, I mean, that is the innovation process, right? Like the whole empathy co-creation that I talk about and work with my clients on is exactly that. Like, you can talk all day about what's in your head, about what you should do, but that's never going to actually lead you through the chaos of whatever it takes to actually create something. And I think I saw you do that in your own personal journey. And so when you speak to that, it actually activates those of us who also are inspired to do that in our own lives, right? So that's a lot of what I appreciate about what you're doing. And what I would recommend, if there's confusion, is to, follow where your heart is, start leaning into people who are doing things that are compelling.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think, one of the things I always advise people to do is the concept of leveraging. Like I always say, I never wanted to go build Tanya's school. I wanted to find that school that was struggling, that needed school books or coloring pencils or crayons, and invest in that school that had already been built. I think there's a lot that we can do to uplift each other. A lot of women start nonprofits. A lot of women work at the grassroots levels in these countries, in these villages. They are the entrepreneurs that see a need and say, I'm going to start this orphanage, I'm going to start this school, or I'm going to do this feeding program or this drop-in center for street kids in my neighborhood. And I really look for those types of grassroots projects to invest in, because for me, those are the entrepreneurs and the innovators and the ones who are committed. And I never felt a sense of I had to be there, I had to be the one doing it, my name had to be on it. It was more about, also looking for those people that were already doing it and in such an inspiring way, and boosting them up and lifting them up.
It's interesting that you say that, because this weekend I was connected with a couple of men who have started this project in Dallas called the Awareness Project. And it's not in Dallas, it's like in Bedford. And, they're just getting started, and it's such a cool idea. And what's interesting about giving is that once you start down the path of just finding things that interest or inspire you, it not only expands how you give, who you give to, but it also inspires yourself to move forward in your own creations that you're trying to create for the world. So it's like this domino effect is what I've been seeing, is like giving some to you, while that may have been an impact, impactful for you, it actually has opened doors for me to find other ways to to give to other things that are happening. It's going from that scarcity to abundance mindset, right? Like the more you give, the more opportunity that shows up for you to give in a way that is also giving back to you. It's really interesting.
No, it definitely works. And I definitely feel that energy as well. Like the energy just builds and grows as you give more, you do more, and you draw people to you, the right people at the right time to help you further and enable that giving. So I've definitely seen that principle operating in my own life and with my journey too. So just a couple of more questions for you, April, while we have your wonderful wisdom. What are some of the things that, as you're a mom, you have a daughter, and what are some of the things that you tell your daughter about giving, or teach your daughter about looking at the world? Or I'm sure she's aware of what you do and some of the causes you're passionate that kids have, all the material things that kids have. How do you, what do you teach her?
She probably teaches me more than I teach her. She's 12. And I think that these kids are so exposed to so much struggle and pain and loss and heartache, then on a consistent basis, and they experience it very deeply. And so there's something, it feels like, ingrained in this next generation of kids that I don't know whether I teach her as much as I facilitate opportunity to bridge from the pain to offering contribution. And so, like, an example of that is this awareness project. It's kind of this large retail center where the guys are pulling in different businesses to do kind of like incubator type things. Like, imagine a incubator HelloFresh where extra meals from, food that is going to be wasted gets prepped, right? Like a book library for people to come in. And so there's like all these giving opportunities, but then there's also like funds coming in to help. We went on Saturday and we just spent 3 hours like hanging art on the walls of the place so that, along with about 10 or 12 other people, there was like all contribution for this cause. And so while she was not necessarily helpful in the sense that maybe they needed, she took care of all the other small children who were running around and a small puppy that were there. So there was like community built in to weaving into contributing to a greater cause that, like, to me, that activates some brain, activation where giving creates community. Community creates hope for others. Like, that's kind of the messaging I think that she's getting. And to be honest with you, I got a lot of that from my church growing up. Like, I got a lot of that, community-based giving to a greater cause. I'm just kind of shifting to see stuff outside of church that allows that as well. And so I think that's the best way I can do it, is facilitate opportunities to also just be present. I try to get her to be involved instead of forcing play dates constantly with other kids. She's an only child. So she's usually around when I sit and have like connected conversations for the point of helping someone in need. And so she gets to hear me, just staying present with people. And I think that that's sometimes a gift in and of itself these days, so I'm hoping some of it rubs off on her in terms of like what it takes to stay present in a world where we all want to flee.
Well, I'm sure you're doing a wonderful job modeling that behavior and creating memories for her too, because she'll look back and she'll remember, oh, I went with my mom to go do that thing in the community. And, I helped in a small way and it still mattered. And I think that notion of whatever you do does matter. I mean, one of the mantras that guided me with baaldan, Mother Teresa said, is if you can't feed 100 people, feed just one. We can all become overwhelmed with the amount of need and suffering and causes and directions you can go. It can be very, very overwhelming. And, that always centers me, like, okay, all these bad things are happening, but I can help one kid. I can feed one child. I can do one nice thing today, or, one act of kindness. And I think that kind of brings me back. And so I think anything we can do to model that for our young people, our children, I think is really important, because life's getting more and more complicated, especially for young ones. They certainly more complicated than when I was growing up, with everything they have around them and technology and everything like that. So one final question, April, and thank you so much for your time and your energy, is, what's inspiring you right now? What's making you happy? What's something that you're reading or listening to or following or doing that's just lighting you up in your world?
Okay, well, I'll tell you two things. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is honestly you. Like, what inspires me about you right now is that, I've watched you in your journey pre-COVID, doing all these amazing things. And then guess what? COVID hits. It's hard to even like get communication funding, et cetera, like where you want it. you know, I've seen you move through this like very difficult situation with the organization, and now like staying with what is going on right now is trying to create more inspiration, more life into something that you believe in. Like holding on to your beliefs despite the storms is super powerful. Like it's super inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
And then the other source of inspiration is I have like become a super fan of this guy named Andrew Huberman. And that's so sad that I butchered his name because I'm kind of secretly having a crush on him. He's a neuroscientist out of Stanford, and he has this free podcast. And honestly, this is so incredible. And I'm a little sad to tell you this before our happy hour, but it doesn't matter because it's like totally changing everything. I don't even mind. He, in his like biohacking neuroscientist way, has created for me an opportunity to like decide I'm stopping drinking. Like it's the weirdest thing. Like it's one of the things that I didn't ever think I could do, but he's inspired me because what he's done is he's allowed like what's in my subconscious belief system to move into like an intellectual knowing. And it's kind of created a difference for me in a way that is very powerful for me or feels empowering. So I'm a super fan right now of just listening to his episodes on the brain and body and heart connection, because of course that's what I'm super passionate about.
Well, that's amazing. And I look forward to hearing more. And I don't drink, so I think this will be fun.
Oh, good. I didn't even remember. I go to happy hour with you, and see, that's one of my beliefs is that I won't be able to go to happy hour with people because they won't want me to go with them. And I love that. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And for all of you out there that are watching this, you know, April Bell is an amazing professional in the market research industry. She's based out of Texas. She wrote an incredible book called The Fire Starter, and she has generously even given proceeds from that book to Baaldan. She's been a longtime friend and supporter of Baaldan Charities. And when I think about tapping into giving, one of the first people that always comes to mind is the wonderful, beautiful April Bell. So thank you, April, for your time and your energy. Many blessings to you. And thank you so much for all that you do in this world.
Thank you.